Okay, I'm going to speak a little bit about gang stalking and color perception, physiological psychology, behavioral neuroscience, and color perception. This has to do ultimately at the end with the sensitization stage of the individual who first gets introduced to gang stalking through the confusion of it. Then there's a distraction stage. Then there's the ultimate sensitization stage. So when an individual first begins to get gang stalked, they have no awareness whatsoever of what gang stalking is. I'd say 99.9% of the cases, maybe there is that one individual who is familiar with the subject, then it happens to them. But 99.9% of the time, the individual has no real connection to the compartmentalization and the orchestrations that are occurring. It appears very elusive. It appears very hostile, elusive, unpredictable. It's almost like coming across an extraterrestrial civilization in a sense, because your whole reality changes. You were born at a certain time. You've interpreted your reality in certain ways. Then you get to a point to where this sort of invasion comes into your life, and it doesn't make sense to you. You don't know what it is. Then upon trying to explain to individuals what's happening, individuals may ridicule you and tell you that you're delusional or you're paranoid, or you may be suspected of using some sort of drug or something, because it sounds very convincingly like somebody may have took a hit at LSD or something when they describe what's happening to them. And this is where education gets involved, because if one person in your family unit is familiar with this subject and it happens to you, that's going to erase the tension by about 50%, and it may prevent the individual from violently acting out. It may prevent the individual from committing suicide. It may prevent the individual from going into psychotic shock. Just to have somebody there who is aware of what's happening to the individual to speak with them about it is going to do wonders for the person. 9 times out of 10, people call me, they email me, we end up talking on the phone, and they're telling me about this gang stalking that's occurring in their life, and they have not spoken to anybody about it. Some of the people have been going through it for 2 years, even longer, and they've never been able to actually sit down and speak to somebody about it. They've been afraid to reach out and talk to anybody, period. And so the way in which it works on the individual is very traumatic. And so, again, this confusion stage, elusive, unpredictable, otherworldly. I always tell people when like the Spaniards made their way to the Mexican Indian, the Inca, the Mayans, those indigenous groups, they were intelligent people. They had their own civilization going, but they were not familiar with these outsiders coming in. They were not familiar with the habits of the outsiders. So they would see things like guns, and they would say thunder sticks. What they were seeing was real, but their interpretation of it, they didn't have the education to understand how these people were creating these guns and these weapons. So they described them in a way that sounded delusional and probably didn't make much sense to people in today's world. We know what they're saying, but the way they're describing it doesn't, it doesn't add up. And so that's what happens when somebody's being gang stuck. What they're describing at times doesn't add up to somebody, because you're listening, you're looking for, how is this going to make sense? I need to interpret this in a way it makes sense, and the way you're describing it does not make sense. So, and you should expect the person to be paranoid. You should expect the person to be scared. You should expect the person to have suffered through psychological damage to some degree. So if somebody, again, comes to you and they're saying they're being gang stalked, especially if it's a family member of yours, don't expect them to be able to sit down and explain it in a practical way and to be able to give it to you step by step by step. This person is not going to be able to explain it like that. They're going to sound like, they're out of their mind. Expect for them to sound paranoid and delusional, all those types of things. Okay, so for me, I was able to start putting things into perspective about 1 year after it started occurring to me. It started occurring to me in the summer of 2015, and then about 1 year after that, I was able to start interviewing people, helping other people who were going through it. Based on my strategies of approaching the people who were doing it and talking to them, people started becoming open with me and describing their participation in it. I quickly learned the majority of these people participating really don't know what gang stalking is. They've never heard of gang stalking. They didn't know, a lot of these people didn't know that I had been covertly drugged. A lot of these people didn't know electronic weapons had been used on me. A lot of these people didn't know things, all sorts of things happened to me. Like I'd walk the streets, people participating in the gang stalking would be driving cars, and because of the assignment that they were doing, they would drive in front of me like they were going to hit me, and they would pull away at the last minute. That happened multiple times. That even happened to me while I was drugged, which is a whole scenario that most people will never imagine what that's like, to be drugged at a restaurant and then walk down the street with cars zooming at you like they're going to hit you and kill you. That's a really tripped out experience. And so when I was able to sit down with people that were participatory with the gang stalking, such as being hired to wear the red shirts and the brights, they didn't know all this other stuff was occurring. And so I said, wait a minute, at least 90% of these people aren't familiar with what they're participating in. And so, again, I always tell people about this. I was seeing a woman for a couple months. It was like a dating scenario. Sometimes she even slept over my place or whatever. But she was completely participatory in the gang stalking, and the technology did all the work for her. She would get financed through Walmart cards, PayPal. She was able to follow me using Google Map apps. Somebody would signal to her, hey, it's time to do the assignment. She would have to wear a red shirt. She would follow me periodically throughout the day, multiple times, and they would show her on the Google Map where to go. So I learned how well networked this was, how it was being financed, how technology was a factor. And then when I came to her talking about gang stalking, she would say, the first time she said, well, what do you mean gang stalking? Like, that doesn't make sense. And I sit down and I showed her YouTube videos about it. I was speaking to her about the different sorts of people I interviewed and whatnot. And so therefore it started making sense. And then I realized there's so many people out there who are participating in gang stalking who don't know what it is, don't know the intentions of it. They haven't had a thorough education of it. But the whole thing is set up as a system of psychological harassment to damage the individual. Again, many people commit suicide. They go out, they hurt somebody else. They do all sorts of stuff. And everybody can be, when you're going through gang stalking, multiple people are participatory in it. I remember there used to be times, and technology is not always used. Sometimes it's just word of mouth. I remember times I would go on long walks through different neighborhoods, through different areas, and when coming into a new area, I would recognize that there were individuals driving around in cars hiring the people on the streets. Like literally pulling over to different people and paying them money to come outside and wear red shirts or to do different sorts of stuff that would be participatory in what is called street theater. And by the time I reached these individuals, they were already had agreed to participate based on whatever story they were given as to why they were doing what they were doing. And so when I came into the area, I would sit down, I would do my best to talk to the different individuals and tell them, like, I'd say, first of all, that, I beat gang stalking. I do interviews on gang stalking. And I would be completely active in describing for them what they were participating in. And a lot of these individuals would look at me like, wow, that makes sense. Like they would always have a look in their eye when it registered, like, okay, that's what I'm a part of. That's what I'm doing. And then I would watch the individuals who had hired these people to do it. They would still kind of be in the area and they'd be driving around kind of looking at the scenario. And so I said, wait a minute, I got to be 10 times more active. And so I realized when I go to a new area or a new neighborhood, I had to be out there more stronger than the people who were hiring the people to stalk me. And so I just quickly just jumped into speed, and I'd hit a new area, just go down the street, just talk to everybody I could, get involved with everybody I could, try to get into a conversation that's cool and calm. Like I would talk to people about music. If they like sports, I would talk to them about sports. But I'd always make a point to educate them about the gang stalking and let them know exactly what they're a part of and exactly what's happening here. Like, this is the scenario that's happening, and this is your participation in it. So most people who get gang stalked, through color perception and through their interpretation, even if the color coding isn't happening, just through their interpretation of their environment, they're going to view everybody being a part of it as being like, it's a hostile thing. All these people are out to get me. All these people are trying to do something to me. There's a lot of people being gang stalked that walk around literally thinking that everybody's trying to kill them or do something to them. I was hanging out with somebody else who was being gang stalked, and that was their interpretation. We went to a store. Before we even walked into the store, I walked up to different people who were doing the gang stalking, and I would sit there and talk to them and shake their hands and hang out. And I said, see, you can neutralize the situation, you get active, and you get involved with these people. But this was a woman at the same time. So for her, it was a little bit more of a scary environment. But we go into Walmart, you got the different sorts of people getting the assignments. I can see them on their phone, looking at their phone, following us around, doing different sorts of stuff. And then she was frightened. She was thinking, like, all these people are trying to kill me, yada, yada. And I was watching how hostile of the scenario she was in, how threatened she felt, how horrible of a situation it looked. And so I always try to explain to people who are going through it, 90% of these people aren't really familiar with what the scenario truly is and what you're going through. But there's always a 10% who are. There's always that 10% who are involved in the electronic weapons, the covert drugging. Sometimes people get death threats. Their goals and what they want to do to damage the individual's mind and frighten the individual and terrify the individual isn't always appreciated by everybody involved. Most of these people are just participants to some degree. It's just been networked in them to get their participation, whether it's the brightening, the red shirts, what have you not. And so that's been part of my whole approach to beating gang stalking, to getting people actively involved. And just let them know what's up. Let them know what you're going through. If you don't speak, they don't know. And so you have to intercept this. This energy is coming to you, and you have to intercept this energy and place on it what you want. You make out of the situation what you want to make it to be, right? So now, once an individual gets out of the confusion stage and they begin to identify the orchestrations of the gang stalking, they know technology is involved, they know that there's people out there doing these campaigns to pay other people to get involved. Once they begin to recognize that, then it gives them a sense of power. Then it comes into the concept of the genie effect, which how you're being mimicked, you can actually change that. That's another subject I've talked about in other videos. But once an individual gets that sense of that power, then the sensitization stage takes on a whole nother meaning. So an individual who is inherently going to be isolated, fearful, scared of everybody around them is going to get active, get involved, start communicating, letting people know what's going on with them, start researching, start studying. Then it's going to change, and the sensitization stage really isn't going to have much of an impact on the person. It may to some degree, but not really. And so I always tell people, if you can get your family members to become aware of what's happening, that's the big key. It starts in the household. If the average household in America, or the average household of the person going through gang stalking in America, had a simple or in the world, it happens to millions of people around the world, not just in America. But if the average household unit, wife, husband, mother, father, children, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, whatever, had a foundational acceptance that these types of things are happening, it would reduce the effects by 50%, to say the least. So now, going back to what I was saying again about the distraction stage, neuro-linguistic programming, right? How people always say, I'm being followed by people in red shirts. All these different people in red shirts keep following me. That's true. They are all following you, right? They're being asked to participate in this color coding thing, and they're following you around. And that individual is being conditioned to be fearful of these individuals following around the red. So it gets to the point to where somebody doesn't even have to be participatory in the gang stalking. They could just have a red shirt. Automatically, the person might think the person's participating in the assignment. That's why I always tell the people to be open and to be available to communicate openly with the people in their environment about what's going on. But so the color coding, the color perception, the sensitization, it paints a hold on a second. Right now I'm looking at a video about psychophysiology, and it's talking about an event that happens, then your perception of the event, it changes your experience of emotion. And it's showing a photograph of a woman coming across a bear, and of course the woman's afraid of the bear. She's getting ready to run from the bear, and that's basically the interpretation with the gang stalking. Is it kind of entrains your perception of reality to be afraid of these people. Okay, I'm going to do a reading real quick. The process of experiencing emotions occurs as follows. Emotion, including sensory stimuli, are received by the cortex. The cortex triggers psychological response in the skeletal muscles. The brain perceives the psychological responses, particularly those produced by the ANS experience of emotion. Our emotional feelings are based on what we find ourselves doing and on the sensory feedback we receive from the activity. Viscera and skeletal. Hold on a second. That's not what I was looking for. This is the James Lang theory, and it states the following sequence of events and emotional states as follows. We perceive the situation that will produce emotion. Okay, we perceive the situation that will produce emotion. So I know I'm being gang stalked. This is for the people who just start getting gang stalked. They know they're being gang stalked, right? And they're perceiving the situation, and they're going to produce an emotion. So the common emotion is going to be fear, anger, uncertainty, what have you not. We react to the situation, physiological responses in the skeletal muscle. We notice our reaction, so the felt emotion occurs after the bodily changes. Hold on a second. Event, arousal, and psychological changes, interpretation of psychological changes ends up with emotion. A lot of people who hear about gang stalking, the thing is, when an individual, it's been almost 3 years since I've been going through gang stalking, and it started around June of 2015, July, and about June, July 2015. And then since that point, I've never left my home or left any area and gone out walking around or interacting with people without going through the gang stalking, without being I've never gone out and hung out for one day without being stalked, literally in almost 3 years. So my interpretation of my environment has changed to some degree, because I recognize that there are people out there who have intentions to employ these tactics, the color coding, the brightening, the street theater. I know that it's being networked to different people. I know people are being financed. I've had people admit to me and tell me about their participation. And it's strange too. One guy was saying, man, as soon as you showed up, these other people started showing up, and they didn't give us a business card. They didn't really show us who they were. They just started giving us, they would pay people $30 to follow you back and forth to the store with red shirts. And this was a neighborhood where most of the people were not technologically savvy. A lot of these people were on drugs, not to be disrespectful. A lot of these people are people I've been knowing for years. But a lot of these people were people who were on drugs, and they weren't in a position to really make educated decisions, or be a part of something. I can't. It's hard for me to put into words, but they were just people on the street, so to speak, right? So they said, man, as soon as you came around, these people would show up and start giving us prepaid credit cards to follow you wearing red shirts, or they would give them cash, $30, and they would use the brightening stuff. And then I would ask them about it, and they didn't know what gang stalking was. And I would sit there and say, I've been going through this for this long. And they said, I remember you talking about that, because they heard me speaking about it before. And I would get into conversations with them about it, and they had no real interpretation about what they were involved in. They just knew they were going to get a few dollars just to put on red shirts and follow me around, or follow me around with the brights on the car. And so I was just like, wow, that's fascinating. But while they're getting their little few dollars to do that, I'm explaining to them that this is happening to me every day, everywhere I go. I'm being covertly drugged. I'm having all these different sorts of things happen to me. Electronic weapons have been used on me. Noise campaigns. It's a whole system. It's a whole system designed that's 24/7 going. And I don't know if they really get. I don't know if they even, most of them don't even. I'm sure don't even care to one degree or another, because they can't. They don't. They're not going to get the overwhelming gist of they're just not going to get it. But it was interesting meeting these individuals while I was being gang stalked and them telling me about it. A few of them. I remember one time I was down at the beach, and I was walking, and a man walked up to me with a cell phone, and he wasn't even talking on the phone. He was just holding the phone, and he was with a woman, and he was a part of a mimic effect. He was chosen for a specific reason to participate in what I call the mimic effect, and he looked real scared, right? And so I'm like, why does he look so scared? and he looked scared. And so I just started talking to him, right? And I said, hey, did somebody pay you to do that? And he had the phone, and he shook his head, yeah. And when he did it, I could tell he was scared, but he shook his head, yeah. And I said, well, who paid you to do it? Who paid you to do it? And then he looked over at a guy in the background. It was like an older guy, looked kind of scruffy with some sunshades on and stuff. And he looked at the guy, and the guy was like way back. And then he said, I'm just joking. And I was like, man, you just gave your man up back there. Why'd you look at him when I asked you that? But there was no, it was, so he walked away, but it was like, I was trying to be accepting of what he was going through. I knew he had got a few dollars to participate, or he got something to do this for whatever he was getting out of it. But the fact that he said yeah so readily, I knew that he wasn't somebody who had participated in this before. I'd never seen the man in my life. This was a while ago. This was a long time ago. This was back in the beginning of the summer of 2016. And so I said to myself at that time, there are so many people out here who have no idea what's happening, but they're participatory in it. But watching him do that day, I probably saw 15 to 20 other individuals doing the exact same thing. So, that's gang stalking. It's multiple different people participating in these small roles, and they're all doing the same thing. And so I always tell people, you're doing the same thing that a million other people did. So when I go back and forth to different areas, it's multiple different people constantly doing it. Nothing's new. Been going on for almost 3 years. Experience can help reduce or abolish emotions. Okay, I like this picture right here. It's a picture of a woman with a snake. Then it's a picture of a little girl with a snake. And it says experience can help reduce or abolish emotions associated with some stimuli. And you can tell by the way the woman's holding the snake and by the way the little girl's holding the snake that they're not afraid of the snake. They're not looking at the snake as being a threat to them. They're holding the snakes up. And I'm going to put a link to this website, but it's picture 17. But they're holding the snakes like, we got these snakes. The little girl, she looks like she's having fun with the creature. And so this is an image that I have for myself of why I tell people to get involved with the people who are participating in the gang stalking assignments. Just because somebody is participatory in a gang stalking assignment does not mean that you have to allow your own mind to interpret this as an attack on yourself. You cannot stop somebody's intention. If there's a covert network of people financing stalking against you, you might not be able to stop that. Right? Unless you're James Bond or Houdini or whatever, you can't stop that, right? But you can change your interpretation of these events. You can change the way you interpret it for yourself. You can change how you react to it. So going out and, again, speaking to the people and getting active and involved and having more education for yourself and educating others, many of them are willing to listen. You'd be surprised. Will change how it affects you. Because you're talking about individuals who are constantly bombarded with this stuff. So you have to reshape and remake this event in your life to fit more into place with how you want to view the world. Just walking around getting gang stalked all day isn't going to help you. It's just going to make you feel more isolated, more entrapped by the experience, right? And so, and then people, there's people being paid to do this stuff. So put their money to work for them. They're being paid to, at the same time they're being paid to do it. So it's like help them work for their money, right? But the snakes, so the little girl and the woman, they're not afraid of the snakes. They're holding the snakes. And so had they had an experience with snakes previous to that, maybe they would have came across snakes and been terrified of snakes, but now they're learning that the snakes aren't as dangerous as what they thought. Same thing with spiders. If a child grows up around adults and there's a spider in the room and all the adults say, the spider, the child's going to learn to be fearful of spiders. But then if the child is taught and explained more about spiders and is shown the spider in a way that is not interpreted as being fearful, then the child's not going to grow up into an adult walking around being terrified of every little spider. So that analogy, you have to retrain. You have to just not think with your mind. You have to think for your mind. You have to be responsible of what you allow to enter your mind and your consciousness, right? Cannon Bard theory. heart rate isn't okay. This is the same picture. The Cannon-Bard theory says that felt emotion and bodily reactions and emotions are independent of each other, both triggered simultaneously. The thalamus then sends signals to two directions, ANS and SMS. Cerebral cortex, which interprets the particular situation cognitively, it states that all emotions produce the same psychological changes. It states that all emotions produce the same psychological changes. There's the event, the thalamus, the cortex interpretation, feeling of fear, emotion. So hold up, I'm going to type in, I'm going to look at something real quick about the brain waves. Now you have the alpha waves. The normal electrical activity of the brain when conscious and relaxed, consisting of oscillations, alpha waves with frequency. Is that the one? I think that's the one where people are watching TV. Yeah, alpha waves. That's usually when people are watching television. They're in the alpha state, right? They're relaxed, yada yada. They're not doing too much thinking. Beta, that's when you're alert, you're awake, you're trying to figure things out. Beta is when you're trying to really get into something, do something intellectual, trying to discover something, learn something for yourself. Theta is interesting. Theta is where extrasensory perception, ESP, comes into play. That's a very spiritual state. That's a lot of people who are into metaphysics, who talk about astral projection and those types of aspects of conscious awareness, like extra dimensional perspectives. Like a lot of people who are even scientists who talk about like string theory and this types of stuff, a lot of them are thinking along the lines of the theta. Reduced consciousness, deep meditation, dreams, light sleep, REM sleep. Gamma, heightened perception. See, and okay, so the different brain waves and the colors, like green I think automatically relaxes somebody, makes somebody kind of passive. Red is a very hostile color. Red makes somebody like agitative, alert, aggressive. Like if somebody walks into a room with a red shirt, it does something to an individual. And this does cross into a little bit esoteric research that I've worked on. When you get into the chakra system, you have 7 chakras. And so the first chakra is the Muladhara chakra, that's the root chakra, and that's for fear and survival. And so a lot of people who spend the majority of their time in the root chakra of the 7 chakras are constantly fearful. Greed is connected to this. They're worried about how they're going to get by the next day. Do I have enough money? Do I have enough ability to accomplish the things I need to accomplish? And the fact that red is used so much when hiring people to participate in the gang stalking assignments, that alerts me that there is some sort of deeper spiritual essence behind the gang stalking. That's why I always say cults need to be looked at when you're talking about gang stalking, because the average person participating in it doesn't even know what gang stalking is. They just know they're going to get their little few dollars and wear their red shirt or get their weekly salary, get their free phone, their gas card, their rental, whatever. Rental car, they get their little cool perks and they're gone. But the overall orchestrations of the gang stalking that happen to the person long term, red, that does something not just psychologically but spiritually as well. So that needs to be looked at. Again, color perception, not just psychological, auto-suggestion. Let me stop myself. Auto-suggestion. Constantly painting a picture of somebody, or painting a picture for a person of them being followed by people wearing red shirts and being hostile to them. That's a form of what you call auto-suggestion. You keep repeatedly stalking somebody wearing a red shirt, then you're auto-suggesting something to them. You're auto-suggesting something to them. And then the fact that this is connected to the root chakra, the survival fear, is very interesting, Very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. There is a paper out there called, I'm gonna pull it up. There's a paper out there called Mind War, and it was written by Colonel Michael Aquino. And his work is really, I was looking at some of his work on his paper, and I thought it was wonderful. Congratulations, I mean, for the Colonel to present this, for the public to read. Thank God, I'm thankful that the Colonel was able to come out with this. Michael Aquino, From PSYOP Mind War to Psychology of Victory. So these sorts of techniques that are employed, and PSYOP means psychology. That's all PSYOP means, it's psychological warfare. So for individuals on a street level, such as myself, to be walking the streets and to have these forms of color coding and psychological weaponry used on me, this pattern, this group stalking with patterns, covert drugging and stuff, it's quite a shock because in essence, if these are being used on the street, in essence, this is a war weapon. These are psychological attacks on somebody. So these are war strategies and war weapons being used on average individuals. And so, I took it upon myself to use it for an opportunity to educate people. But a lot of people out there are getting hit bad with this stuff. Okay, hold on. PSYOP to Mind War, the Psychology of Victory, by Colonel Paul E. Valley, Commander. I'm not familiar with him, but I'm a little bit familiar with the Colonel Michael Aquino, based on this research right here. PSYOP research, an analyst team leader, headquarters, 7th Psychological Operation Group, United States Army Reserve. So we get it. So this is a paper that was produced years ago, and when you get into it, and the Colonel's on YouTube now doing interviews about this stuff. The Colonel's smart. The Colonel's on YouTube and he does interviews about this with people, and he sort of explains what Mind War was about and the psychology behind Mind War, and how the idea is that you don't need conventional warfare like bombs and all this sorts of stuff to take care of an enemy. You can use through psychological, right? So the Colonel is on interviews with this stuff. And it's some interesting stuff. You gotta check the Colonel out. Colonel. Hold on, let me go down a little bit. The advantage of Mind War is that it conducts wars in non-lethal, non-injurious, and non-destructive ways. Essentially, you overwhelm your enemy with argument. You seize control of all the means by which his government and populace process information to make up their minds, and you adjust it. You adjust it so that those minds are made up as you desire. Everybody is happy. No one gets hurt or killed. Nothing is destroyed. Now, again, this is. He's talking about a population of people. Perhaps you can say a population of people in some sort of other country, which you would employ the Mind War against. But I'm reanalyzing aspects of the Mind War and describing how this is stuff that goes on within the gang stalking. You can see aspects of this that are used in the psychological attacks that are employed against the people who are being directed. Gang stalking is directed at. Okay, the antagonists just maim or kill each other's people or steal each other. Let me go down a little bit. Let me go down a little bit. Okay, hold on a second. Text history. hold on a second. Hold on a second. It's been a while since I read this. I'm trying to find a place that I was at. Psychological. Okay, I'll start here a little bit. Psychological warfare is the coordination and use of all means, including moral and physical, by which the end is attained. Okay, so he said including moral and physical, by which the end is attained, other than those of recognized military operations, but including the psychological exploitation of the result of those recognized military actions, which tend to destroy the will of the enemy to achieve victory and to damage his political or economic capacity to do so, which tend to deprive the enemy of the support, assistance, or sympathy of his allies or associates or neutrals, or to prevent his acquisition of such support, assistance, or sympathy, or which tend to create, maintain, or increase the will of victory of our own people and allies, and to acquire, maintain, or increase the support, assistance, and sympathy of neutrals. That's exactly what's happening to people when they're being gang stalked. Even their family members are participating in it. Their friends are participating in it. Even the gas stations they go to, the employees that are working are participating in it. Neighbors for sure. Co-workers. So you have a system out there that's networking to multiple people that you come across and people you meet. And basically, there's a psychological operation that's being financed to target you. And you're sitting there saying, wait a minute, I'm being followed by everybody with red shirts and brights on their cars, and noise campaigns, and covert drug and electronic weapons, and yada, yada, yada. Lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. And that's, yeah, you're a target of an operation that's networking to all these people to psychologically attack you. So getting into material like this is good to recognize that you gotta get in context with the thinking behind it. Then you have to get into context with ways to heal yourself, right? Now this goes back to a little bit about color perception and emotional healing and neutralizing the situations and finding ways to educate those involved in it and those around you. That's the way in which you deal with it, right? You recognize that this is an operation or some sort of attack that has been put upon you, and so now you're going to remedy the situation. You're going to go back to the laboratory and educate yourself and get the knowledge that you need and be forthcoming. Now, me, myself, I came out with the confusion stage, distraction stage, sensitization stage, audio and visual, all that type of stuff. And I just go on and, continue my research and come up with different ways to remedy the attacks that have been done to me, or I come up with ways to remedy the attacks that have been done to others. And I think that's a big learning opportunity for a lot of people to see how you can deal with this. Okay, if the euphemism psychological operations resulted from, as one general officer put it in a 1917 letter, a great synonym which would be used in peacetime that would not shock the sensibilities of a citizen of democracy, then it may have succeeded. Okay, hold on a second. I'll stop here because I haven't read this in a long time. I was looking at it a couple of weeks ago, but I didn't really read it. I was just looking at it and skimming through it. So basically, healing yourself, recognizing what's been happening to you and healing yourself is number one. But then learning that there is information out there that speaks about how this stuff is used. They might not say gang stalking per se. Like I didn't hear when I was reading that information just now, I didn't hear the term gang stalking. But you got to go out there and find information that cross-references what exactly is happening to you, like behavioral modification or neuroscience, whatever. Those are areas of education right? You see there's degree programs actually for emotional, hold on, what is it? Emotional, hold on a second. Man, there was a guy, I was just watching his video. Human emotion, psychophysiology.
Welcome back to Human Emotion.
And experts in emotion. And these guys are talking about what people are going through gang stalking need to learn. Psychophysiology, experts in emotion, 7.1. John, I can't pronounce his last name. Kakip, I can't. On physiology, experts in emotion, series director. So this. Okay, this is for people who are interested in studying emotion. Man, basically their educational mission is basically to heal people. And a lot of people who are being gang stalked should definitely look into this stuff. I always view this stuff as like kind of like the gang stalking. I always viewed it as more so as the feeling that I get is more so as like parasites, like emotional parasites. People trying to create scenarios to target you and to mess with you and get you off track and to agitate you. Psychological harassment. It's definitely being stalked the whole time, and so to me it's sort of like parasites. And if you're sick and you have parasites or whatever, you remedy it, don't you? You go get help. You go to the doctor and you get a medicine, or you get somebody who can help you. And so that's sort of what is coming into view for people who are going through gang stalking. People are making all these phone calls and trying to call people and get help. It's not going to, people, there's really nowhere these people can go. The people who come to me, they say, I've tried everybody and no one's helping me. I can't get help anywhere. And I'm being stalked, I'm being harassed, I've been threatened, I've been drugged, I've had all these horrible things happen to me and no one's helping me. What do I do? And so I say, well, you remedy yourself. You hit the books and you start discovering new ways to interpret what's happening to you. And you talk to the people who are participate in it, you talk to the people who don't know about it, and you produce what education you can, and you counsel yourself and counsel other people. And so that's the first step you do. You approach it from... you approach it from an intellectual perspective. You get that education you need to deal with it in whatever way you can. And so if you have to cut corners, and so to speak, and go in other areas, that's exactly what you have to do. Experts in emotional healing. Like if I see some information available and I see it's going to help me, whether it be the colonel or somebody else talking about it or whatever, like I go and I get the information, and I use it and I utilize it in whatever way it's going to help me, or I think it's going to benefit the person who's contacting me for help. So that's a big part of it. So I'm going to leave a couple of these links up for people so they can go through this stuff, try to learn more about it, help themselves. I always tell people, like, don't count on anybody else, count on yourself when you're going through gang stalking. You're talking about a network of people who is using money and communicating with people to employ stalking and harassment against one individual. And so you have to use every opportunity you can and everything at your disposal to get yourself to where you want to be. Like you can't really waste time or wait for somebody to come and help you that's not going to show up. But most people aren't even going to really have a great understanding of what's occurring, because even though you're going through gang stalking, your situation is going to be a little bit unique, to say the least, just because of the scenario that you're in, the different types of things, the timing that it's happening to you at. Everybody that's going through gang stalking is going through the same stuff, but every situation is a little bit unique because everybody's different. So I stress to people, don't waste time. Don't waste time. Just jump into it. If you discover something that you feel is going to be helpful, you jump into it and just utilize the opportunity as much as possible, and then keep going. Like, you look for the next opportunity and the next opportunity and the next opportunity. If you feel you've made some mistake, you got to keep in mind you're being stalked. Keep that in mind right there. If you're going through gang stalking and you're listening to me right now, keep in mind you're being stalked every single day of your life by multiple people. You may be under attack from psychological weapons. You may be getting covertly drugged. You're being attacked by a united mental force of people trying to destroy your life, trying to mess with your mind, trying to harm you. So if you make a mistake, that's okay. You're just one individual. That's okay. Don't trip off it. If it takes you to make them, that's fine. Don't trip off it. You're one individual. If it happened to them, they probably wouldn't live through it. So just keep that in mind. So mistakes are going to be made, and you may misidentify certain things, or allow yourself to get caught up in certain scenarios, but you can't trip over it. You constantly look, you stay fired up, and you constantly look for new opportunities and new information, and you keep going with it. Now, if I knew what I knew now when I first started getting gang stalked, my life would be things would have worked out so differently for myself. If I knew what I knew at this moment when I first started getting gang stalked, a lot of things would have been different. A lot of things would have been different. I had to go through literally hell through the people who've been stalking me and doing all these things to me. Hell for almost 3 years, because I didn't have the knowledge that I have now. I didn't have the awareness that I have now. I didn't have the insight that I have now. So that's why it's so important that I tell people, get the information that you need now. Right? Don't skip over it and say, well, I'm just being gang stalked. What do you mean you're just being you're being stalked? People are attacking you. People are attacking your life using money and using networking and using connections to try to harm you and harm your life. That's the reality of it. So you can't take it lightly. You have to utilize the information, utilize the knowledge, and get resourceful and try to make new connections, new opportunities for yourself every single second. Like, it's not nothing you can take lightly.